I don't know why I'm recording this on the hottest day of the year. I'm melting. If you see me sweating, that is why. Hey everyone, it's Ed here. Today we're going to be looking at the accessories I picked up alongside my RED Komodo. Now the great thing about this camera, and probably one of the major reasons I got it, is that it's super versatile on how you can rig it up. But that can make it quite a daunting task when you're starting from scratch and deciding what accessories to pick up. Especially as sometimes you really need to see some of this stuff in action to know whether it will work for you. When I was researching to buy this camera, I spent a ton of time watching some really helpful rig porn where other people went through all the things that they picked up for their Komodo. So today, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you which items I picked up with my Komodo. We're going to be looking at the cage, the grip, top handle, power options I got, the monitor, the cables, the storage media, lens adapters, and my audio solution. So first up, I'm using a SmallRig Cage because it was cheap and it was on offer. But also one of the main reasons I got it is because it's modular. So I knew I was going to get the Outrigger handle, which mounts to the top of the camera. So I needed a cage solution that didn't block that off. So the SmallRig Cage, you don't have to use the top plate if you don't want to. You know, it's fine. It's not going to protect your camera if you drop it, but it does give you some of those much needed extra mounting points on the camera. So I did opt for the Outrigger handle. It's stupidly expensive for what it is, but you know, it works and it does what it's meant to do and it does it very well. It obviously has a start, stop, record functionality, very easy to adjust very quickly, especially if you're working with one hand. The grip is very comfortable. It's got some sort of special grippy, rubbery stuff on it. It just feels nice in the hand and it doesn't slip when your hand gets sweaty. The record button is nice and textured, so you can locate it without looking. One thing I would probably say is, you know, it's probably a good thing for many people, but the record function on that button, you do have to press it quite hard to trigger it. And I've been caught out by that a few times where I thought I'd hit record or stop recording and I hadn't pressed it hard enough. But yeah, I think it's the best option at the moment for the Komodo with its start, stop, record triggering. And honestly, it's the part of the camera you're going to be interacting with the most. So if you can afford it, it's worth it. If you can't, you know, don't worry. It just makes shooting with the camera a little bit more comfortable. It's not going to sort of like revolutionize the way that you shoot or anything like that. On the top of the Outrigger handle, I've just mounted a little 100mm Nato rail. I think that's from SmallRig. And this will just be used for mounting additional accessories, such as this top handle I've got from SmallRig. I already had this, so I've just moved it onto this camera. I'll see how I get along with that. I think it's fine for the moment. It's got plenty of mounting points. It's got two cold shoes. Originally, I mounted the monitor I have on the top handle cold shoe, but to be honest, I didn't really like the positioning of that. It felt a bit off balance and a bit sort of clunky, or it looked a bit clunky. I don't know. I just didn't like the way it was balanced with the camera when I used it. So I got another little mount, I think that was from SmallRig, and you can see where I placed it here. It's got like an ARRI locking pin, and I much prefer the positioning of the monitor here. It just feels a lot more balanced, it feels a lot more streamlined with the camera, and for how I shoot, it just seems to work a lot better and be in a much better position. So for power, my main solution was the Tilta Advanced V-mount power plate. I think that's what it's called. This basically slots into the BP battery ports at the back of the Komodo, and then it has a wire that plugs into the control port of the Komodo. It's got a ton of ports on the back to expand the camera's functionality. The plate has a P-tap and two 2-pin LEMOs and a 5-volt USB for powering accessories. It's also RED approved, which means when you use the V-Lock batteries in it, it will communicate battery information directly to the camera, so you can monitor how much battery or power you have left in your battery, which for me was quite important. It's part of the reason I bought this particular plate. Make sure you check for that because they don't all communicate that. For batteries, originally when I got the camera, the Tilta power plate didn't arrive, it was out of stock, so I had to get some BP batteries to power it. So I just got the cheapest I could find. I think they're called Blueshape. They work fine. But for a professional setup, I'm going to be using these FX-Line Nano 2 batteries. I kind of looked at a few options and these seem to be the best sort of trade-off between size and capacity. They're 98 watt-hour, which means they're also permitted on carry-on luggage on aeroplanes. They're ridiculously small and seem very appropriate for the Komodo form factor. With these 98 watt-hour Nano 2s, I think you should get around 2 to 3 hours powering the Komodo. Obviously, if you're plugging in other accessories, it will affect that runtime. So I was charging them through the USB port, but it seemed to take ages. So I ended up stumping up for the full battery charger. Another little thing I quite like about these batteries is that they have a little screen on the back which gives you a readout of the power output and the power remaining. The battery itself has loads of ports as well, so it's got 3 USB ports, standard, a micro and USB Type-C, and it also has a D-tap on the side. So along with the Tilta plate, there are tons of ports available to power accessories. I did pick a monitor up with the Komodo. It's the PortKeys, whatever it's called. You'll see it down here somewhere. But yeah, it's the one that can remotely power the Komodo over Wi-Fi. Now, the monitor I've been using for ages is the Blackmagic 5-inch 12G, and I think that honestly would have been fine. And I kind of wish I'd left this off my shopping list because the PortKeys is nice, but I just find it a little bit more clunky to use in terms of the menus. The video assist from Blackmagic has excellent menus, it's very responsive. And I actually find the camera control with the PortKeys monitor to be a little bit laggy, and I end up just sort of relying on the top screen on the Komodo more often. Your mileage with this monitor will definitely depend on what your previous monitor was, if you had one. I think it is actually a really great monitor for the price. It's very affordable. But because maybe I've used the Blackmagic monitor for so much longer, I just prefer it. I feel like the menus on that are so good that any monitor I've used after that has really just not compared. It's not horrible, it's just maybe not as good as my Blackmagic. So to connect that monitor to the camera, I just take a D-tap from the camera power plate into the monitor to power it. And then I also just got a Alvin's cable 12G right angle SDI cable. I just prefer that to a standard one. It just keeps stuff a bit more tidier, and it potentially just adds a bit of protection to the SDI port on the camera from knocks and stuff like that. Great thing about SDI cables is that over HDMI is that they're just a bit more secure because they lock into position. For storage, I got the 2x1TB Angel CF cards. They're fine, they work. To be honest, I much prefer using these CF cards than standard plastic SD cards. I just trust them a lot more. I mean, they do get really hot, but with SD cards, I'm always just terrified of breaking them. They just seem a bit too fragile and plasticky for that kind of use. The one thing I don't really like about the Komodo is that it's only got a single card port, whereas on previous cameras I had at least, redundancy with dual SD card recording. So that is this one thing I don't like about the Komodo. It makes me a little bit nervous. Generally, these 1TB cards should give about 2.5 hours each, and that will be shooting in 6K LQ quality at 25 frames per second. I also bought the Canon variable ND adapter, EF to RF. It's a pretty good solution actually for the lack of NDs in the camera. The dial on the adapter is pretty sensitive, so you have to be gentle in terms of dialing in subtle adjustment. I've also got the Canon 0.71 speed booster. I really love this. I've used speed boosters before when I first got a GH4, so I'm no stranger to them. It's basically an EF to RF adapter, but within that you've got another lens, and it basically compresses or reduces the image coming in from the lens and squeezes it onto the smaller sensor size. So effectively it takes an image from a full frame lens and compresses it down into the Super 35 sensor image on your camera, and effectively it gives you an equivalent full frame focal length and an extra stop of light on your lens as well, which is nice. Finally, let's get on to the audio solution. So obviously the Komodo doesn't have XLR inputs, so I was looking around for a solution for this, and I settled on this, the Zoom F3 audio recorder. This came out earlier in the year. I don't know if you can even get it in the UK yet. I had to bring it over from America, but it's a super small audio recorder which I can power off my Vlog battery, but it also takes AAs as well. It's got 2 XLR inputs which can be phantom powered, so you can put a range of microphones in there. It's tiny, it can be mounted anywhere. At the moment I've sort of used a magic arm to mount it onto the side of the camera, but I'll probably find a better solution for that in the future. But the killer feature is that it has 32-bit floating audio, which means when you record you don't need to set the input gain, so it's very difficult to clip. It's basically capturing in a high dynamic range of audio information, so it's capturing all the dynamics from very quiet stuff to very loud stuff. So any solo shooter who's had to cover sound or works without a sound operator knows that, you know, monitoring your camera, your sound, and if you're interviewing someone as well, you know, splitting your mind between those three things can get very stressful. So having a solution like this that is sort of, you just set it going and it records without having to worry about riding or monitoring the gain is really useful. I'll probably put out a separate video, to be honest, on using it and what I think about it. But it just records to a micro SD card, and you can obviously take a line out, put that into the Komodo for scratch audio. A few other little things I've also got this little Andy Cine cable clamp thing that I just mount onto my handle, top handle, and that just keeps some cable management in check, especially the cables from the monitor. It's kind of cool. You just sort of mount it wherever you want and clamp the cables in. It's kind of one of those little accessories you don't really need, but when you get it, you just end up really loving it. And they're not that expensive. I've also got some various other bits which I sometimes use to keep stuff a bit more tidy as well. I think what will be interesting is that I'll probably revisit this video in 6 months or so to see if I'm still working with this setup. One of the things I still need to figure out is how to get the setup I'm running on my shoulder rig. If you've configured your Komodo for shoulder mounted working, I'd really love your advice on what you're using and what works. If you of course have any questions about anything that I've covered here, about any of the items or any items I haven't covered, just drop them in the comments down below. Thanks for making it this far, and until next time, see ya!